It's time to pull those belts tight, race fans. The front stretch is coming at you, presented by Joe's Karting in Council Bluffs. Now, here's Dan Taylor and Dirk Houston.
Well, good morning to you, race fans, and welcome to the front stretch, presented by Joe's Karting in Council Bluffs, online at joeskarting.com. Fast-paced white-knuckle racing indoors, just across the river on 23rd Avenue, next to AMC 17 Theaters, in the Quaker Steak and Lube Mid-America Center, Bass Pro Shops, kind of an area on that 24th Street exit in Council Bluffs. Get over there today. Do yourself some indoor karting racing, and this is the perfect time for it to be indoors because it's starting to get a little bit chilly. Joining us on the phone now is a guy who has driven NASCAR vehicles, and for some reason he stumbled into car ownership, or truck ownership as it would be right now. We're joined by DJ Copp of DJ Copp Motorsports. DJ, how you doing, bud?
I am well. Hope you guys are.
We're enjoying another December day in the Midwest, and loving to do what we get to do very little these days, which is talk racing. In the off season, you don't get to talk about it enough.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, but there's a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes, that's for sure, especially for a small organization like ourselves coming off our first year. We're trying to solidify some things and enhance what we started building on in our first year.
Well, I was gonna say is for us sitting in Omaha, Nebraska, we don't get exposed much to the auto racing world as much as we would like to. You probably never not get exposed to it. It's got to be a daily, hourly thing for you.
Yeah, so I started back in '95, and you know I've been fortunate to be able to work in different aspects of the sport, and this ownership has been by far one of the biggest learning curves I've had to take on, and this being the first off season for us, it's you reflect back on all the things you did wrong and how can you correct those and the things you did right. Make sure you want to be able to duplicate those and put yourself in a position to capitalize again when those opportunities arise. So there's a lot of second guessing. There's a lot of hopes, fingers crossed, you name it. But the one thing that doesn't happen is certainty until probably about February 14th, right around the time they dropped the green flag for the Daytona race.
Talk to us a little bit about how this whole thing got started for you.
Well, actually, I was kind of exiting the sport. I started wanting to be home on my weekends a little bit more. I was a pit crew guy for about 17 years, and traveling on the weekends, I missed a lot of barbecues, and I was kind of exiting the sport. And my wife, who works with Blake Cook and Colleague Racing in the Xfinity Series, we've still been around the racing, still involved, and a friend of mine reached out and said, "Hey, let's do a truck deal." So I thought I'd kind of help get them started. And then because my wife was in the Xfinity Series, I was like, what, maybe we got another year of travel in us or two. And long story short, I won't go into all the details. That organization kind of fell away, and I acquired the assets and said, hey, let's see what we could do here. We're probably not going to be this close to having a team. So Amanda Leach and myself, we initiative and went to Daytona. And, we really had some thoughts of, let's see if we can get through the first race. Let's see if we can get through the first four. And then next thing you know, the season went on and we started piecing it together and we made it through the year. So, there's a lot of details in there, the term devil is in the details that I'm leaving out there, but it was a lot of hard work. At the end of the day, it's the checks and balances when it comes down to the finances. Every aspect of this sport is controlled by money. And we looked at it and said, hey, we have this much in bills, and this is how much we have left over. And whatever was left over was the level of racing we were able to do. And it's not the top notch. It's not where we want to be, but we don't owe anybody any money. And through hard work and sacrifice, we made it through.
In this kind of a sport, to not owe anybody money has got to be a victory in itself.
It's funny. Amanda and I talked about it a lot, and we said, what are our goals? What do we want to do? And one of my goals was, I don't want to owe money to anybody, because you're exactly right. I could go into many, many stories over a beer one day on the issues with financing through other programs and such. And I didn't want that reputation. So I'm very fortunate. I might wear some people out ahead of time saying, how much do I owe you? Oh, it's going to be around X amount. No. Tell me exactly how much it is, because if I make that commitment, I want to make sure I can fulfill it.
Well, that's a great asset to have. And you mentioned that the Truck Series got started this year at February at Daytona for your debut season with Copp Motorsports, racing the 36, 63, and 83. Talk about some of those things that you showed up to Daytona for and just thought, how don't we have this done yet? Just kind of some of those things that just slipped.
Yeah. So, sorry. We just got back from visiting Santa. My daughter, she's 6 years old. She's getting out of the car, so you might hear her in the background. But
that's fine.
You just referenced referenced that a few different truck numbers, and the 83 is our priority. I've been fortunate enough to work with some great people. Mike Mittler operates the 63, and we were able to partner with him and the 36, and then had a phone call not long ago. It looks like we're going to have that relationship moving forward, but you got to have strategic relationships in the Cup Series and all these other in the top tier Xfinity. You hear about alliances. Those alliances are really helpful too, even at the lower levels. It's just they're structured differently, and the alliance and what you get within the terms of those agreements are sometimes different. Ours was a lot of support, a lot of shoulders there to be able to cry on and things of that nature. So I'm not sure that I answered your question because I was a little distracted there, but I did want to address the different numbers that we do operate with.
I appreciate that because it could get confusing keeping track of what numbers are whose team, but. Well, the reason why I asked the question I did was because we just talked with the team back at Kansas at Starcom Racing who just got started in the Cup Series, and they mentioned that their biggest goal for getting to their debut at Kansas was to make sure they had everything they needed. And so I kind of asked at February, did you have everything you needed when you showed up to Daytona?
No way. No way. It was ridiculous. I got some good friends. Todd Peck, he drove for us at Daytona, and Keith Wolf, he's their crew chief, and he came about, and they really helped me get through the first third of the season. And if it wasn't for them, who knows what would have happened. But throughout the year, the relationship with Mittler Brothers, Bobby Daughter, who's a great asset as well, and being able to have the longevity that I've had in this sport, maybe not as an owner, but through TV with ESPN and the pit crew, like I mentioned and such. I've been able to build relationships and people trust me. And when I did need something, I was able to reach out and put my hand out, and usually somebody filled it with the favor I was looking for. So, it was a lot of bumps in the road, a lot of, like I say, favors, a lot of crawling on my knees and begging to some people. But I made it right in the end, and that's how we got through.
Well, it's kind of interesting that a couple of the people you've mentioned with Mike Mittler, he's a friend of our show. We run a crewman for a day contest, and we had somebody as a crewman for Mike back at the truck race at Kansas last May. And then Bobby Daughter, David Starr is a friend of mine, drives for Bobby. And we had somebody over at Newton, Iowa in July at the Xfinity race was a crewman for David, so on Bobby Daughter's team. So we're pretty familiar with both those guys, and both great people and putting together good organizations.
Yeah, they really are, and I hope to be. I hope to have the reputation that those guys do. They've been in the sport for a long time, and in order to be in this industry for as long as they have, you have to do something right. They don't have big money, they don't have the big sponsors, but what they do get, they capitalize and leverage to the fullest. And you've seen organizations come in or individuals come in with the big money and bring in the big sponsors, and they don't do the right thing. And the sponsor's gone and those owners are gone equally as quick as they came in. So when you look at people that may not have had a big, bundle of success, I think success in this industry can also be based on the longevity that those guys have put in. So I put those guys right at the top of anybody. Because of how long they've been able to last within the sport through all the changes.
What's on the horizon for 2018? You mentioned that you just worked out a deal with the Mittler brothers to continue your partnership for them. So expanding on past then, what do you guys have planned for 2018?
Well, it's a good question.
Could we talk again in January?
I'd probably give you the same answer, unfortunately. I'll give you a little insight. One of the things that helped me with my ESPN career was the fact that I really wanted to give the behind-the-scenes information of how it really is. And, I got to be careful at the same time, but the reality of it is there's a lot of unknowns in this industry. And for those that are wanting to get into the NASCAR industry at the Truck Xfinity Cup level, aren't often aware of just how much it takes. not just financially. I think it's kind of out there, the finances, but it's still a sticker shock when they actually see the hard numbers and how much it is for a cost of a set of tires or an entry fee or a flight or, the fuel in the hauler to go to Las Vegas or something. Those are still sticker shocks. You think, they're a lot, but until you actually write the check, they become a lot more.
Yeah.
But I guess in the end, a lot of people are talking right now and going through that educational phase where we can show people and tell people what really is the cost and how much is involved in this sport. And you have to vet every one of those out. I made a promise on my Copp Motorsports page that I would reach out to everybody that tagged somebody. And I'm still working through that. So anybody listening, I apologize. I'll get to you. That blew up. We had 20,000 impressions.
Wow.
We had over 700 individuals get tagged, and we're working through that. But in the end, I don't have all the details in place. We're working closer. I have a passion of giving people opportunities, but at the same time, the way the sport is structured, you have to earn the right to be able to compete at the bigger tracks. And there's only so many small tracks these young individuals that want to have use as a stepping stone to get involved to get approved to go to that mile or mile and a half track. So from an owner, it's great because Martinsville is probably going to work out great to give somebody a new opportunity, maybe Bristol, maybe Phoenix, and then Dover. But that's only, 5 races a year?
Mm-hmm.
I have to sell the other 18. So I'll probably lean in towards some experienced people that might be able to help me get through the year. But ideally, I'd love to have one driver and run for points.
Well, one name we can throw to you, and I did throw that on your post. I did see that post, was a young man by the name of Zach Ralston, who's originally from Iowa, but he does have some ARCA experience and has relocated to North Carolina, so you might want to check into that young man.
I'll definitely do that. Like I said, I'm kind of working through the list. I work from the top down, and I want to get through everybody once, and then I figured those that responded, I'll work back through the top of the list, and hopefully we'll funnel this down. But I haven't gotten to Zach yet. I do recognize most of the names that I've reached out to, and I do not think I've reached out to Zach yet. So I apologize.
Okay.
But it's coming.
Not a problem. Like that, it's going to take you a while.
DJ, I'm glad you brought up the economics of the sport because I think now more than ever it's becoming more mainstream for owners and drivers to talk about how the economics of the sport have really tipped in the wrong direction. And that you mentioned little things that, NASCAR's trying to implement to help save these teams money, like reducing the pit crews, reducing the number of tires that are available for each team to purchase. Those little things. Is there things that maybe you're mentioning to NASCAR that you would like them to explore to help save you guys some overhead?
Oh, yeah.
I guess that's about the perfect answer, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
You got to give credit to NASCAR for trying, right? The unfortunate part is we're in an industry right now where the decisions that were made 5 years ago, we're feeling the impact of that.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, the sport has turned in a way where, I won't even say it's the sport. I think it's society, right? If you look at automotive technicians, they're down. There's a need for automotive technicians. Automotive enthusiasts are down from where they were 20 years ago. Society is changing. I don't know if they're going over towards like the sports car series or if it's more computer based and individuals that just don't want to be in the automotive industry. I don't know, but we see a lack of individuals taking on. I'll use the term, and I don't mean any disrespect by it, but the grease monkey.
Mm-hmm.
Get in there, get your hands dirty. We don't see many of those people as we did in years past. So the sport isn't as visual as it once was, where you could get a sponsor and you put a sticker on the side of the car, and that justified whatever the spend was that they were providing. Today, there's terms thrown around like social media, making sure you get the ROI, the return on their investment through social, and whether it be through engagement or conversion or just a simple impression. What is the sponsor's goals? Well, those are all hard to come by and achieve because of the way the industry is right now. B2B, business to business is another one of those forums that people are throwing around. But at the end of the day, there's a lot of talk around all of that. We need individuals that are still willing to get down, get their hands dirty, and provide not just an introduction, but they need to see the process through A through Z and help convert, help show somebody money can still be made in this industry by providing exposure and providing whatever it is the goals are to those people that are going to put up the money to be a sponsor, right? So that's where we're lacking right now. And unfortunately, NASCAR has kind of put themselves in a spot where, the finances are so great at the same time of the reasoning I just got done explaining, the dwindling of automotive enthusiasts. Hope that makes sense. I didn't mean to get wordy on that.
No, I think it does. I think you hit it.
Yeah, I mean, blue-collar jobs in general, it seems to be a lot of jobs around. I mean, I know the mechanics I all know are extremely busy right now because, like you said, nobody wants to come in and do that kind of thing. They've just decided they can, go work on a computer or something like that and not get their hands dirty and make decent money. So we do a segment with our show that we call Young Guns, where we try and highlight kids racing go-karts, anybody with just a year or two in the sport. And we had a kid that's 16 years old back here win, was it Division IV NASCAR weekly national title, got the $10,000 scholarship to Northwest Ohio University.
Yep, UNOH.
Yeah, and that's where he's planning on going to school. And so at 16, he was moving up to another division already. It's just insane for the kids that do it. But like you said, they're few and far between.
Yeah, and I'll touch it. It's outside of the racing realm, but I think I use the term grease monkey, right? And if you look at auto mechanics or diesel techs or whatever it may be, that there is a transition going on there. It used to be the guys that were filthy dirty up to their neck, and I'm one of those guys, right? I'm not talking bad about any of those guys, right? I grew up on a farm in a junkyard, and I'm proud of it, and I still love wrenching and getting in there, and I often show my hands when there's dirt under the nails, and I'm like, this is when I feel the most accomplished. But it's one of those things where the automotive industry isn't that anymore either. People want this image of a job, right? You can still walk into those dealerships, and now they've got the perfectly clean epoxied floors. They're wearing the gloves. They're not getting dirty. And guess what? These automotive jobs are paying, $100+ a year with benefits and taking care of your family. And so the automotive industry has not changed as far as what the need is. We need people to be able to work on vehicles and make sure they're safe and operational. What's changed is how it's visualized. And I don't think people have taken the initiative to learn more about those technician type jobs, to learn that it's not the grease up to your neck and all that stuff anymore. It's a pretty clean business, and a good living behind it too.
DJ Copp of Copp Motorsports. Buddy, we look forward to seeing you out. Do you realize, I think I did the math really quickly in my head, we're about 8 weeks away from Daytona, from the big race on Friday for the Truck Series.
I ain't even gonna lie. The hair just stood up on my arms when you said that. That's great. It's tough. It really is tough, this industry. Right now, I've had one part-time guy all year, and I contract labor everybody else, and I work my butt off, and I'm going to be single if I take that approach again next year, so I can't do that. But we're going to keep working. We'll see what we can do, and right now our goal is a full season, but I do know that things have to be a little bit differently. When we started the program last year, 2018, Daytona was the focus, and we've done that. In order for that, and the reason that was the focus is because then I had something to sell through the off season. And if things come together, then great. My goal was really accomplished. If they don't, then we're going to have to tailor things a little bit differently. But I'm excited for the outcome. I really do think there's some good opportunity with the spec engines. If we can come up with a little funding for those. I've got Childress chassis, and I think we got good equipment. This year we strive to be the best of the B. I think we were there. And with a little help, I think we can get into that A group and turn some heads. So we'll see what happens and go from there. But I do appreciate you guys reaching out. And for anybody that's out there, please reach out to our social page. We're very raw. We're very open. You'll see my daughter on there. She's peeling decals and underneath pulling a Ford 9-inch rear end with pop-off from time to time.
Well, the bad part is you said 6 years old, so 16. So another 10 years, you'll have to be fielding something for her, I think.
Oh, you know what? It was so funny. So my good friends, Andy Loden, Nick Loden, if you guys aren't fans of Nick Loden Racing, check him out. He's got a quarter midget, 2-time national champion this year, national champion last year. We went over there, and she drove the quarter midget. She loved it. And she asked Santa tonight for a four-wheeler, and Santa says, well, I'm going to have to ask Dad about that. And she's like, it'll be okay. We already got a go-kart. And she does. So.
DJ Copp of Copp Motorsports. Bub, we do appreciate your time. We look forward to seeing you on the track at Daytona, at the track at Iowa and Kansas when we get to run into you, man. Thanks a lot for your time. Have a great holiday season.
I appreciate it. Same to you. Everybody have a safe holiday.
All right. Thanks, buddy.
See ya.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
We got to take a break. We're going to come back in turn number 2. We had planned on talking with Jordan Grabowski, so we apologize to all of his fans that tuned in this morning. Schedules just didn't line up, and they fell apart right when we were recording the show. So instead, we're going to talk about a couple of NASCAR news and notes. In turn number 3, we're going to kick off this weekend's Legends of the Dirt Series, brought to you by Kosiski Auto Parts, with driver of the number 24, 410, and 360 at Knoxville Raceway and Touring Series. That's T-Mac Terry McCarl. We'll talk to him in turns 3 and 4 about his career, his kids racing, how his racing has evolved over the years, and some of his insight into the sport. We're going to do that in turns 3 and 4 for the Kosiski Auto Parts Legends of the Dirt Series. We're going to take a break. We'll come back in turn number 2. We'll be back here.
We all have that coworker that runs their mouth off at how great they are. They shot a 5 under par, 95-mile-an-hour fastball, bench press 375, brah. Wouldn't you love to shut them up by schooling them at Joe's Karting? Council Bluffs' premier indoor karting track, professionally designed so each corner is your opportunity to embarrass your coworker. Call Buddy for your next company outing at 712-256-5278. Joe's Karting, white knuckle racing just across the river on 23rd Avenue next to AMC 17.
This week's young gun on the front stretch is 17-year-old Chantel Bade, known as Baby Bade. Chantel is the youngest of 4 sisters, 3 of which are all turning laps at dirt tracks throughout the Midwest. Chantel started her racing career in 2007 in the go-kart class. After 9 seasons racing in the karts, she finished top 5 in the points in 2013 and 14 before winning the championship in 2015. She also won the Queen of the Hill Challenge at Mini E in 2015. Last year, Chantel finally convinced her dad to let her get a hobby stock where she's raced for the last 2 seasons. Someday she hopes to win a hobby stock championship before moving into the sprint car class. Outside of racing, she's working on graduating high school, then plans to move to college where she wants to be a NICU nurse. Chantel will have a busy off-season preparing her new Jet Chassis, American Drywall, Rose Graphic, TJT Photography, O2 hobby stock for the high banks of Eagle Raceway. This week's Young Gun on the front stretch has been presented by Craig Kelley of Inserra, Kelley & Sewell, personal injury attorneys.
For almost 70 years, Inserra, Kelley, Sewell have been Nebraska's premier personal injury firm. Race drivers, fans, and their families have been calling Sunset Speedway's Craig Kelley for over 30 years. The IKS firm focuses first on your healing and appropriate medical care, then they focus on getting you great results. Craig Kelley and his experienced team at IKS stand ready to handle your injury claims in both Nebraska and Iowa. If you or a loved one have been injured, Google Craig Kelley or call him at 402-391-4000.
We're hooked up in turn 2 and still showing the green flag on the front stretch.
Welcome back to the front stretch. Heading into turn number 2, brought to you by Quaker Steak and Lube, the official watering hole of the front stretch. And again, I do apologize for the Jordan Grabowski fans out there. We'd had Jordan scheduled, but he had something come up last minute, and we had to kind of scramble. And so now we're going to talk about a couple of the latest news stories that are circling around the NASCAR Cup Garage and throughout the sport. We're going to work very hard to get Jordan on next weekend or the coming weeks, because I always do love talking to Jordan. He's a great local insight and amazing local talent. So we'll talk to him coming up very shortly. And again, I really do apologize for anybody that tuned in to listen to Jordan, but he's going to be coming up in the next couple of weeks. Dirk, as we recorded the show on Tuesday, the news finally broke that Kurt Busch had signed a deal with Stewart-Haas Racing. And you had talked about no surprise there. I kind of am surprised because this went on a lot longer than it felt like it should have.
Yeah, but it was kind of a double-edged sword because they were probably working with sponsorship dollars and probably wanting to put as much money on the table for Kurt as they could.
Yeah.
But, we talked recently about Earnhardt's last deal being a $4 million contract with $20 million on the backside with his sponsorship endorsements, personal service contract, all that. Mm-hmm. I don't think there's anywhere near that kind of money lined up on this deal for Kurt.
Yeah.
My guess is it's probably back into a percentage deal.
Yeah.
And I haven't seen purse structures lately, so I don't know if that's a 30, 35, 40, 50% deal. My guess is somewhere between 30 and 50. And he might have got a small amount up front. He might have got, $500,000 or something, but that would have depended on the sponsor package.
And this is the new world that we live in. We talk about the economics of the sport, and teams just cannot afford to pay these drivers what they were getting paid 5 years ago, 6 years ago, 7 years ago when things were healthier, and they especially can't afford to pay them what they were paying him 10, 15 years ago when things were at their peak. And because of this, we're seeing a lot of veterans exit the sport for one reason or another. Casey Kane, Greg Biffle, Matt Kenseth, almost Kurt Busch. We're seeing these guys that are exiting the sport not ready to retire. And
well, Casey Kane's not exiting the sport.
That's true. You're right. Yeah, he's just not with Hendrick anymore. And let me just point out to anybody, changing of the guard has happened 10, 15 times in this sport. Old guys, old drivers, veteran drivers exiting their teams, not ready to exit their teams is nothing new to this sport, but I think the pay scale is a new reason why.
Well, yeah, it's more economic driven right now than it's ever been.
You can go and get somebody like a William Byron to sit down in a car who, I'm not saying anything bad about him. He's incredibly talented.
Won a title.
We've noticed that. But he's much cheaper to get because he's young and inexperienced, and it's a newer mindset with these contracts than it is to re-sign with Kurt Busch. And so you kind of wonder if we've talked about all the different possibilities of Stewart-Haas Racing were they going after Matt Kenseth? Was Cole Custer in their back pocket that if they couldn't re-sign Kurt, if they couldn't get Kurt at the deal, they had options to be able to go, and I think maybe that's one of the reasons why it took so long was that, unfortunately for Kurt, if he would have stuck to his guns, and I'm assuming here, which is always dangerous, if he was looking for X amount of dollars and sticking to his guns, he may have been out of a ride. They may have signed Matt Kenseth for a 2-year deal, or they could have gone and got Cole Custer for a 5-year deal.
Well, I'm figuring somewhere here in the next few days we're going to find out where Carl Edwards eventually signed, because I think him signing is what allowed them to keep Kurt.
True. Yeah, Carl's back in this. What do you think? Maybe
I don't know. He might have signed with John Deere.
True.
You know, he said he's doing a lot of farming lately, but he signed on somewhere, and that allowed them to re-sign Kurt Busch.
Another news story that came out of the headlines over the last couple of days: Richard Childress Racing and Richard Petty Motorsports form an alliance, and this is something that it makes sense when you read the article, but it's a little bit interesting because they're competing organizations. Now, Richard Petty Motorsports is going to be switching to Chevy in 2018. And because the lease in their current shop is up at the end of 2017, they're going to be moving over to fill in the empty space that Richard Childress has, because Childress has a shop for a 3-car organization, but they only have 2 cars under contract right now, and they don't have any plans for the 27. So for the time being, Richard Petty Motorsports and the 43 are moving over to Richard Childress Racing shop. They're still going to be operating as separate entities with an alliance to work together. Do you think this is leading to a couple of years from now we're going to hear a big announcement of a merger between the two organizations?
I don't know if there'll be a merger. I don't know what's behind the King. I don't know what's behind Richard Petty as far as, the motorsports moving forward. It's going to happen eventually. Richard Petty's going to pass away. Where is RPM going to go?
Yeah.
Is maybe Richard Childress going to buy it?
Honestly, this is kind of what it feels like to me of when Dale Sr. passed away and DEI was up in the kind of in the air of what's going to happen with it. Teresa merged it with Chip Ganassi Racing, and now that whole Chip Ganassi kind of took on the entire operation for DEI, and now the DEI portion of the entire group is pretty much gone.
Well, DEI is still doing engines. Still doing motors. That's what they're doing.
And name it only. But DEI, as we saw it with Fielding, Michael Waltrip, and Dale Earnhardt, they're
an engine shop. That's all they are anymore. They're not building cars. They're not doing anything like that. But their engine facility was second to none, and they are still building engines. And those engines trickle down to all 3 of the major series. And I'm sure that they've probably got a dirt track and like a K&N division of stuff they're building engines for too back there.
But to my point for that whole thing was that I think like what you're talking about with Richard Petty getting as old as he is, and we all know what's going to happen eventually someday. None of us want it to happen because he's such a legend in this sport, and it'll be a tragic day. But there's going to be a day that RPM will cease it'll lose its value once he passes away.
Right.
With him being at the track, it's sponsor value, it's fan value, it's merchandise
ambassador
value
for the sport.
And maybe this is a smart move on Richard Childress to say, why don't you guys come over? We'll work together, and eventually, and it's a 5-10 year deal. I'll eventually absorb your guys' portion, and then so on. So I think to answer my own question earlier, I do think this is a the beginning stages of a merger between the two organizations.
Yeah, a merger or a takeover, however you want to look at it.
One last topic I wanted to cover here in Turn 2 before we move on to the Kosiski Auto Parts Legends of the Dirt Series in Turns 3 and 4. Danica Patrick, when she announced, I believe it was at Homestead, that she would not be returning to the Cup Series full-time in 2018, but she had worked out a deal to run the Daytona 500 and the Indianapolis 500. She never mentioned what team, and we found out a few weeks ago what team that was. Unfortunately, the way we found out was some pretty bad news for her. The team was reportedly Chip Ganassi Racing, and that she was going to run an extra car for Chip Ganassi at the Daytona 500, and she was going to run at the Indianapolis 500. Well, apparently talks for those deals have broken down, and doesn't look like that's going to happen now. That's kind of surprising to me. I figured biggest race for NASCAR, biggest race for Indy, somebody would be able to put together a deal for her to go and race both of those races because it was going to make somebody a lot of money.
Well, and as we were talking before we came on, I still think that she will end up in the Indy 500. I do think that her resume with the Indy cars and whatnot is going to get her something there. I mean, she's a marketing phenomenon. Go ahead, if somebody signs her, you might as well start ordering a couple semi-loads of T-shirts to sell. But I would be surprised if she ends up with the ride for the Daytona 500. Mm-hmm. That will surprise me.
I agree. I would be surprised also. And like we talked about before the show, I would be shocked if there wasn't something put together for the Indianapolis 500.
Correct.
Because that's a sport that, NASCAR definitely needs her star power. Whether you like her or not, whether you like her rise to fame, whatever, you cannot deny she moves the needle. She moves the needle just as much as Dale Earnhardt Jr. does, and she will move the needle much as these young guns do. Actually, I think she moves more because she's an absolute marketing powerhouse, and she's a merchandising powerhouse that makes a team a lot of money. I'm kind of surprised they weren't able to put something together for the Indy 500.
Well, like I said, I think something will come back for that. I mean, Indy doesn't have, the guaranteed spots in the field and everything like NASCAR's got. If a NASCAR owner takes a shot on her, he's not going to have a charter, so he's going to be one of 4 cars trying to come in. She's not a past champion to get the provisional or anything like that. So it's a lot more of a gamble for them to try and put her in Daytona, on a one-off type deal than it will be trying to put her in the Indy 500.
Yeah, but she's proven at Daytona if she has a quality ride, she can qualify up in the front. She's qualified. We all know that she qualified for the front row at Daytona one time, and she's qualified very well at super speedways before, within top 10s, top 5s. So she's proven that she can qualify with a quality car, but that's tough to produce at speedway tracks like Daytona and Talladega.
Well, yeah, and it's plain and simple. Your one-off teams aren't going to get the quality ride that she had before. Right. I mean, when she first jumped into Stewart-Haas stuff, and even last year, she had top-notch equipment. Mm-hmm. So,
hey, coming up this Tuesday, we plan on heading down to Quaker Steak and Lube, the official watering hole of the Front Stretch, to sit down and record a couple of these Legends of the Dirt series in person. Glenn Roby, Mike Boston, and Roger Hayden are the 3 people that we're targeting. We're probably going to get all 3. I just have to get answers back from them by now. But we're also going to invite down some other drivers. There's a ton of drivers that are going around racing all over the country right now, especially a couple of guys like Cody Ledger and Josh Mose that are planning on a race in the Chili Bowl. I'd love to get them at Quaker Steak and Lube and interview them in person because I think those interviews sound better. Plus, I'm always a better radio host when I've got a lube tube or two. But that's personal
a tube lube or two?
Yeah. So mark your calendars. Tuesday, December 19th, coming up this Tuesday, we're going to try to go down to Quaker Steak and Lube. And like the Front Stretch Facebook page, we'll keep you up to date with everything that's going on regarding that.
And isn't Tuesday night all-you-can-eat wings, I think?
It is.
It is.
It is all-you-can-eat wings. Hallelujah. We're going to take a break. We'll come back in turn number 3. Terry McCarl is this week's Kosiski Auto Parts Legends of the Dirt series. We're going to talk to him about his career, everything that's going on, and some of the things that were very painful for me to hear because I'm kind of a squeamish guy. You'll have to just wait and listen for all that stuff. Coming up in turns 3 and 4, the Legends of the Dirt series brought to you by Kosiski Auto Parts. This weekend it's going to be T-Mac, Terry McCarl. We'll be back here on the Front Stretch.
Have you ever watched NASCAR, dirt track, or IndyCar and thought, I could do that? Joe's Karting in Council Bluffs is the place to put your money where your mouth is. Races fire off every 10 minutes, so what are you waiting for? Get to Joe's Karting on 23rd Avenue in Council Bluffs, next to the Mid-America Center, and find out how easy it is to drive a race car. Each Joe's Karting car is powered by an eco-friendly Honda engine capable of a 14-second lap. That's if you're as good as you think.
If you love wings, if you love rings, and all kinds of other tempting things, great times, great food, get to Quaker Steak and Lube.
Quaker Steak and Lube is the official watering hole for the front stretch and the best place to catch all the NASCAR action today. Open at 11 a.m. with delivery available to Council Bluffs.
Great times, great food, get to Quaker Steak and Lube.
Feather the brake and get back to the gas. Dan and Dirk are headed into turn 3 on the front stretch.
Welcome back to the front stretch. Heading into turn number 3, and it's time to continue our Kosiski Auto Parts Legends of the Dirt series. And a guy that, well, quite frankly, I can't believe he hasn't been on the list yet. But after about 5 or 6 years of doing the Legends of the Dirt series, we finally got him on. He's the driver of the number 24, 360 and 410 sprint car over at Knoxville Raceway with the All-Stars, World of Outlaws, the NSL, all over the place. He's even gone and raced in Australia, and that is none other than T-Mac himself, Terry McCarl. How you doing, sir?
Doing well. How you guys doing?
We are definitely enjoying the Midwest in the off-season, kind of relaxing. And I didn't realize this. You know, during April to October, there's this thing called sleep that I don't get a lot of, and I can only imagine you're probably the same way.
Yeah, it's it's crazy, but we love it, I guess.
Yeah, and luckily we have a couple of months to recharge, and that's all we need because we'll be back at it in February and March. But I wanted to talk to you about your career for the first part of this Legends of the Dirt series. Talk to us about how you got started. I believe you kicked it all off with racing go-karts in '84, right?
Yeah, I really, my dad raced sprint cars and got, broke both his legs twice and broke his back and broke about every bone in his body. He's kind of the evil Knievel of sprint car racing. So he wasn't real hip on me and my two brothers racing sprint cars. So, I didn't race anything. It's definitely nothing like these kids these days. And he definitely didn't want us racing anything, and I understand that. But, when I was 18, a friend and I bought a go-kart together, and I went and raced that for 1 year, and then I was lucky enough to get a ride in Darrell Aaron's number 1A the next year in 1985.
And you said your dad wasn't too keen on you jumping into that car. I can kind of understand back in 1984. Nowadays, they're still dangerous, but they're much safer.
Yeah, they're going much faster. So, unfortunately, I broke both my legs too. I didn't want to emulate my father that way, but things happen. But yeah, they're definitely a lot safer. I think these seats, the helmets. I mean, if you pick up one of my dad's helmets or one of my early helmets, how much heavier they were, and there's so much safety with those Butler built type seats, and now the head and neck restraints and everything. So it's definitely helped a lot of drivers have a lot longer career. When Lloyd Beckman beat Doug Wolfgang in 1977 there at Knoxville and broke his 10-win streak, I mean, I remember thinking what old man he was, and I think he's probably just in his 40s or maybe, there wasn't anybody hardly 50 years old racing sprint cars for sure. So now you got guys, that are even 60-year-olds still racing sprint cars and doing pretty well. So that's definitely for all the safety features.
And even knowing how dangerous it was, seeing firsthand, watching your dad and all the medical issues he had, all the brakes, all the massive wrecks, you still wanted to do it.
Well, when things are bad, you wish you'd have done something different. But I want, just like you guys and all the fans out there listening, it's really addictive once it gets in your blood. Racing's pretty addictive. I always tell people I've never done drugs in my life. Anyone who knows me knows I don't do drugs, and it might have been cheaper for me to do heroin, I think. I don't know. But my sons are addicted to racing, and it's great. It's a great sport, really. It's a great family sport, and we spend, my sons and my wife and I, we spend a ton of time together, and it's because of racing, really, and we enjoy it. And so, racing, I think, can be real beneficial. And, actually for these young kids coming up, to keep them, like I did, if they want to race their go-karts or micros or whatever, they got to get good grades and don't get in trouble and hopefully stay off drugs and that kind of thing. And, you can use it as a parent. You can kind of use racing and against those kids to keep them on the straight and narrow, hopefully.
Well, if you've got a race car, you don't have money for drugs.
Absolutely not. That's a good line.
You go back to getting it started. You said 1984 with the buying a go-kart. I'm kind of surprised that you said you were 18 at that time. That seems late to get started racing karts.
Yeah, that's like I said, in today's world, that seems kind of crazy. But, I was actually looking at after that year of go-karts, I was real close. The IMCA modified thing was just coming out, and I was looking at possibly buying IMCA modified, and I was lucky enough to get in Daryl and Gloria Aaron's number 1A, and it was kind of a tragic thing on one end. Their son died of cancer the year before. Chris was a friend of mine, and him and Daryl were kind of a father-son team, and Daryl built the engines. Chris kind of worked on the car, and they had a lot of decent and good drivers and a really nice car at Knoxville and around this area, Jackson and things. And out of nowhere, he got cancer and died relatively quickly. And I think most people thought Daryl was going to quit racing, and he might have been quitting. And so it kind of worked in my favor because nobody really called him in 1985. And I called him and asked him to drive. I still remember it pretty vividly, being in my basement. Actually, Lori, my wife, we were just kids and going out together then, but she was there when I called Daryl, and I was fortunate enough to get in his ride, and it was a great ride. A really well kept. Daryl really keeps a really nice car, and actually I have that car. Daryl kept it after I quit driving it. Yeah, he kept it, and I think Danny Toman drove it a few times after me, but I have the whole complete car sitting out in my garage right now, no engine. But so I'm gonna finish it up here one of these days, and fortunately and that just kind of started the ball rolling. We got. Ran really well. All I raced was, at Knoxville and then at the Jackson Nationals. He didn't travel. He didn't have the money to, go race these other tracks. And so I really didn't get many laps, but right away we were pretty fast. And I think I missed the feature the first week or so. And after that, I made every single feature the rest of the year, and including the qualifying night of the Knoxville Nationals. I didn't make the A main, but my first year I made the B main at Knoxville Nationals. So that was pretty big.
And growing up in Altoona, I got to imagine Knoxville was the mecca for you.
Oh, absolutely. It still is. But, growing up 30 minutes away from it, you're pretty lucky to have the greatest dirt track in the world that close, and kind of get spoiled. The fans do too, I think. But I'm fortunate enough I travel around the country and the world, and I see a lot of the tracks. So every time I get a little mad at Knoxville for doing things, I just travel a little bit and realize how great they do things. So, we're just fortunate to live so close to it.
Yeah, the other track that got just torn down there, the fairgrounds there in Des Moines, did you get to do a lot of racing there, or did they run much sprint car stuff?
Actually, no, I didn't. But I won the Danny M Memorial there once, so I have won there. But I think I've only raced there probably twice, maybe three times, maybe, and we were able to win that one. That's pretty sad when something like that happens, but you get a fair board in there that doesn't realize the potential of racing, and they think they can make more money other ways, and once that thing gets torn down, it's pretty hard to get it built back up.
Take me back to 84, 85. You said you karts in 84 and then got into your first 410 in 85. One Rookie of the Year at Knoxville, right?
Yes, sir. Yeah. We had, like I said, we missed the opening night. Daryl wasn't ready, and then we came and raced, and then we missed the third night, I think, and Daryl had hurt his back, so I missed a couple of races, and then we had a couple of DNFs, and I still finished 9th in points in my first year and got Rookie of the Year, so that was a pretty good year for us.
Most Improved Driver in 86. You're on an up. You just keep on climbing up that rung, winning some pretty prestigious awards early in your career, and really having some really good points series. Finishing 4th, 6th, 2nd. Got really close in 93.
Well, my second year in 1986, I actually they don't do this very often, but they had a 2-day show over July 4th, a Friday Saturday deal, and that was probably only about my 20th time or so, 22nd time in a sprint car. I led the feature all the way to the last corner, last lap, and I got sideways in traffic, and Shane Carson got me coming for the checkered and the Beaver Tool 12X, and then the next night I won, and then I won the next 2 weeks. So I actually ran second, and I won 3 weeks in a row, and coming down to the final night that year, I was basically tied for third place, I think, with Jeff Tuttle and John Stevenson in points. It was kind of, if I remember right, we were, whoever finished ahead of who that night ended up finishing 3rd, 4th, and 5th in points. And I was leading the feature by a straightaway and blew a tire, and went to the back and came back up to 9th. We ended up running 5th in points my second year. So that was really big. We had a lot of buzz going on. There wasn't any internet back then, but I had some pretty good offers, and I went and drove the Beaver Tool 12X the next year that Shane Carson beat me with. Actually, it was a big money car, and Bob Bueller was a great guy to drive for. So, unfortunately, Daryl really couldn't afford to go racing, and I'd kind of outgrown that thing a little bit, and we just needed to travel more, and I was able to get in that 12X car and be able to go to Devil's Bowl and places like that. I was able to travel a lot more.
How much were you able to travel with Daryl?
Like I said, Daryl, all we raced was Knoxville and the Jackson Nationals. He's from Algona, Iowa, so we go for the Jackson Nationals. It was a really big race back in those days, the week after the 410 Nationals at Knoxville, and so that's really all I did was drive for those 2 years for Darrell, and we just raced Knoxville and Jackson. So any young guy, I think, especially Knoxville's such a great track and well prepared and well lit, and these young guys need to get on short tracks, like out in California or anywhere they can to learn to bump, rub wheels a little bit, do wheelies, do some, get on some inconsistent tracks. Knoxville, like I said, is such a well-prepared track. It's actually kind of easy to drive comparatively to tracks when you go to California, and there's whoop-de-doos and big old ledges and all kinds of crazy stuff. So a sprint car on those kind of tracks can get pretty wild, but I think everyone needs to run those, especially young guys, to kind of get their bearings and learn how to drive a sprint car.
I like how you said that earlier about how the Knoxville fans and drivers can get spoiled, because it's easy for you to go there for a couple of races and just think, well, this must be what racing's like. Everyone's got a giant 40,000-seat stadium. They've got lights, amazing track prep crew, and top-notch announcers, and, huge everything. And then you go to some of these tracks, and it's held together with gum and duct tape.
Yeah, and fire crew. Knoxville has a great fire crew, and that's
yeah.
something as a dad I especially look at more than I used to when I was just a kid driver. But Knoxville, it's a very difficult place to win. Don't get me wrong. The same way back in my dad's day, you got to have, there's the best of the best go there, and you got to have serious horsepower, and you got to really have a good night to win. It's a very difficult. I think it's an easy place to drive generally because it's so well maintained, but it's a very difficult place to win at. So if you win there, you can definitely win anywhere, and if you can dominate there, you really got an amazing team.
And it's tough to compare winning a single race at any other track when you've won at Knoxville. It's kind of like, hey, cool, I won here. Hey, cool, I won there. But, man, I won at Knoxville this year.
Well, I think for me, and just growing up around racing and reading about it, winning at Williams Grove and Eldora. In fact, I was just watching my first ever Eldora win the other night on video. But, that meant a lot to me. Those tracks, I think, compared to Knoxville as far as, stature, historical value as far as winning and what it means. And, so those tracks, when I first won at those places, it meant a lot to me. But, like you said, Knoxville, that's, people come from all over the world to race there. I mean, it's like little Sydney in Knoxville now with all the Australians coming over. But, that just goes to show you, how big it is around the world and what an amazing place it is. But, a lot of these tracks, I grew up going to Eagle and places like that watching. So to get my first win at those places, they meant a lot to me too.
And we talked about just a little bit ago, racing with Darrell in that 1A car, and now you've moved on to the 12X, and you've started really touring nationally. Are you following a couple of series like the World of Outlaws, or are you just kind of touring around hitting some big points or some big purse-paying nights?
No, I still, basically focused on Knoxville as a cornerstone, but then, like I said, we were able to go to Devil's Bowl and places like that. And actually about halfway through the season in 1987, I got hurt in the 12X. A wheel broke, and it was kind of ironic. Rocky Hodges was driving my dad's car, and he hit me while I was flipping in the feature. And it's probably one of my worst crashes ever. I didn't break any bones, but I was in the hospital till Wednesday, and had a real bad concussion and everything. So it was a pretty bad deal, and that I came back to the 12X, but I wasn't quite right yet. And so they hired Randy Smith to drive. I kind of got fired/quit. And, then my dad was running a 5 Merrill Contractors car, and I was able to we had a ton of success there. The rest of 87, I won, made my first A meet at the Knoxville Nationals, ran 12th, and we won. It was one of those deals where they rained out and ran Sunday. We won. I want to call it the States feature, the mystery feature, but they call it the non-qualifiers feature in the record book. But actually, I made the A meet at the Nationals, so I definitely wasn't a non-qualifier. But we won that race at the Nationals too, and we won some races, run up by Marshalltown, and I started traveling with my father, and he took me out to California and places like that where I needed to go bad. I needed to get away from the big half miles and start running some short tracks, like I said earlier, and learn to do that. And that's still not really my forte, the little short tracks. I'm not really the one kind of guy that to bang wheels and tear up equipment, but it was good for me to go out there. My dad really, he had a really good car with that Merrill Contractors 5M and great engines, and it took me traveling a lot, and that really helped me a bunch.
Who were some of your heroes around that time you were just getting your feet kind of cemented in the sport?
Well, my dad, of course, always was, and A.J. Foyt, back in those days, my dream was to be an IndyCar driver, and no one really cared about NASCAR back in those days, and A.J. Foyt was kind of the same type of guy my dad was, and those were kind of my idols. But, Roger Rager was always someone who stood out in my mind. I was able to spend a lot of time with him. He drove for my dad on and off, and he was a pretty amazing guy, and he could grab a sprint car and bench press it, basically pull it up to his waist, no problem. That was one of the strongest guys I ever met. Back in those days, those cars weighed a lot, and he was a pretty awesome driver. But to me, when I was a little boy, Joe Saldana was always my favorite. I got a couple of his autograph cards I keep in my safe. My wife laughs at me. She's got pictures of the family and wills and things like that, and I got a Joe Saldana autograph card in there, so signed by Joe. But you got to have your priorities. But growing up, he was definitely one of my favorites. But once you start racing, I'm a pretty competitive person. I didn't have any idols. I just wanted to beat everybody.
Do you have a tough time separating the guy that you've idolized with the same guy that you're racing next to? Do you pull up next to him and think, oh my God, that's Wolfgang, or that's Kinzer, or that's Saldana, or are you able to block that out?
Well, starting out, 87 when Dad took me on the road, with the Outlaws. Of course, Steve Kinzer was larger than life, and that was a bit intimidating, those guys. But I fit in pretty well. I'm pretty good at blocking that. That kind of stuff didn't really bother me when I was out on the racetrack. I wanted to beat them, and I wasn't very intimidated by any of them on the track. But just being able to hang out with them in the bars and hear stories and things like that is what I really loved. But when it came to being on the track, it didn't bother me, and I just wanted to beat them.
Yeah. Let's take a quick break. We'll come back. We're going to finish up the rest of your career. Really started getting your point standings championships at Knoxville, knocking down several of them, even in a row. And then your kids get involved. So we're going to cover more coming up next with the driver of the number 24T, Terry McCarl, as the Legends of the Dirt Series rolls on. We'll be back here on the front stretch.
For almost 70 years, Inserra, Kelley, Sewell have been Nebraska's premier personal injury firm. Race drivers, fans, and their families have been calling Sunset Speedway's Craig Kelley for over 30 years. The IKS firm focuses first on your healing and appropriate medical care, then they focus on getting you great results. Craig Kelley and his experienced team at IKS stand ready to handle your injury claims in both Nebraska and Iowa. If you or a loved one have been injured, Google Craig Kelley or call him at 402-391-4000.
Fall has arrived, and so have the cold temperatures, but that doesn't mean you have to stay home. Get into Joe's Karting today and enjoy the Metro's largest fully heated indoor karting track. Get your friends together for a white-knuckle experience you can only find at Joe's Karting in Council Bluffs. Hours of operation, discounts, and lap times can be found online at joeskarting.com. That's karting with a K. Get to Joe's Karting today and discover Council Bluffs' best-kept secret, 23rd Avenue next to Mid-America Center.
It's checkers or wreckers as we enter turn 4 on the front stretch, presented by Joe's Karting in Council Bluffs.
Welcome back to the front stretch. Just about ready to wrap this baby up. Rolling into turn number 4, about ready to come to the checkered flag. But before we do that, we're going to continue our conversation, the Kosiski Auto Parts Legends of the Dirt Series with T-Mac Terry McCarl. We talked about his early career, winning early and often and touring nationally. The wins really started coming about the 2000s, early 90s, or late 90s, when you started knocking down some of your the big point standings wins, is what I'm talking about, with the 410s at Knoxville.
Well, what happened with me is it was the late 80s there, and I really got to a point where, they really just, it's kind of the same now. There's not a lot of money around the Midwest as opposed to California and the East Coast. There's so much more population out there, which is going to be more businesses, more car owners, more money. And it was tough to find a ride around here, and I kind of stalled. My dad was out of money and moved on and was working for other people. And I was fortunate enough. I called Jimmy Sills up in late 1989 and asked him if he knew of any rides out there in California. And he told me about this new team starting up, Country Builders Construction, Weldon Ophil and his family. And it was a big deal for me. It was what I needed. I needed to get out of here, and I needed to race more short tracks, and I needed to be with a team that could afford it. And like I said, they were new, and I was about their son's age. I was a little bit older than their oldest son, so I fit right into their family. And I was lucky that Weldon liked me and hired me, and I stayed out there for 2.5 years or so and ran with them. And then we went on the Outlaw Tour, in 1992, and just got to travel all over the country. Kind of slept in my truck a lot and stayed in some pretty crappy hotels. And Lori was pregnant with Austin, but I had a valuable experience, and learned so much being on the road and ran mile tracks and everything. And my dad would come out and help me, every once in a while, get us back on track. But that was big for me because I got a lot of experience, and then came back to the Midwest. And in 1995, Bill McCroskey sponsored me and bought me 3 new West Mars, and we were rocket ships. I had a couple of Maxims, and I'm sure we'd have won the championship that year. I set fast time, won the heat, was leading the feature, and the power steering line broke opening night, and ended up getting into a crash and shattering my left hand. They almost cut my little finger, my ring finger off my left hand, and oof. Had to have it all wired together and screwed together and everything. And we still ended up running second in points. And But that hurt me for my first championship. It just seemed like, I kept running second to Danny Lasowski. When I came back in '93, I ran second to him. And in my own car, my black 27 car, Troy Renfro, it was kind of a neat story. Troy Renfro was my mechanic. He lived in my house with me, and that's now who my son Austin drives for in the 2KS. And I've got pictures of Troy when Austin was a baby, Troy holding him and stuff. And we had a one-car garage with a dirt floor, and I had to run a drop cord from the house back to the shop for him to work at night. And I think I paid him $150 a week. And we put that thing on the third row of the Knoxville Nationals and ran second in points to Danny Lasowski and Guy Forbrick. So it was a pretty big deal. Opening night at Knoxville, I remember I had one right rear tire, or one right rear wheel, and one left rear wheel. And I borrowed another one from my brother, and I borrowed a set of gears. And Chuck Merrill from Maxim fronted me a car and let me make payments on it, and kind of built a team from there. We went up, from that deal. And again, in '95, McCroskey got on, and it just, my team just kept growing and growing from there every year. It just seemed like we just got a little bit better. And then, I think I ran second in points like 4 years in a row to Lasowski, and then the Herrera that year that I broke my hand. And it was real frustrating, but I would go to the banquet and I would sit there and look at those guys that won. And it just motivated me more and more every year. I'd sit there and go, I want to be that champion. I'm going to win this thing. And, I got into Guy Forbrick's car in 1999 and won the championship with him. And then that started the ball rolling. We ended up winning it 6 years in a row. You
had to start wondering if the championship would ever come with 4 seconds in a row and then a third in '98.
Yeah, that's what I tell people, these young guys coming up. I'm like, I ran second a bunch of times and third and things like that before I ever was able to win one. So, don't give up and stay motivated. And like I said, those banquets were always good for me because I wanted to be, Danny Lasowski, and I wanted to beat those guys, and it just motivated me every year to be better. And
Stanton, you had to just kind of sit there and, I would assume, kind of steam, like, I should have had it. I can't believe it. It's the fourth year in a row I finished second. What am I doing wrong?
Well, when I broke my hand, that one was pretty tough to take because, like I said, McCroskey had given me all the right things I needed, new motors, I had new cars, and we had all it was Troy Renfro was my mechanic again, and we went down to Florida, and everybody was down there in Volusia. I won the overall sprint week title, speed week title down in Volusia. We were really fast. I was real comfortable with those cars, and the Westmars ran really, really well. So I feel like we had a bit of advantage, and then, of course, I shattered my hand opening night. But that one was probably the toughest one to take because I know we should have won that one. But again, you got that's how life throws stuff at you, and you got to keep digging. And if you want it bad enough, you got to keep working hard.
Keep moving through your career. Did you ever race full time with the World of Outlaws, or was it kind of something that you just hit every once in a while?
Well, in '92 I did it with the '88 Country Builders car, but I did it on no budget, and like I said, we were sleeping in the truck, but it was great. I wouldn't change it. We finished 9th in points, but in 2005 I went back on the road with them with Big Game Tree Stands was my sponsor. I was the team owner, and we were going pretty good. 2005, we had 12 fast times, 12 second fast times. I talked to my old mechanic, Steve Fitzpatrick, who helps me now again. If they had this format that they have right now, we'd have ran top 5 in points easy and made a boatload of money. But back then they inverted 6 and took 5, and I was so fast. Those Westmars were so fast. Like I said, I had 12 quick times, 12 seconds. I don't know how many times I was 3rd through 8th. In today's format, they start these heats straight up, which I don't like it. But I definitely would have loved it back then if I was qualifying as good. But in 2006, we had a great shot at winning the title, and I was second in points to Donnie Schatz. I can't remember the day, May 23rd, I think, and I was only less than 50 points out of the point lead. And we had a real strong car. Our motors were good. Steve was great. I had a good crew, and I had a driveline break over in Sharon, Pennsylvania, and snapped my left leg backwards. My left foot got snapped backwards, and I broke my left leg, and that took us out, and Tim Schaefer got in the car and almost won a few shows, and Dean Jacobs got in the car and actually won his only outlaw show at Lernerville, and Sammy drove it a few times and ran really well. So we had a really strong team. That's another one of those really disappointing ones you look back on. If I just hadn't got hurt, and I come back less than 3 weeks after I broke my leg, and I won a local show at Huset's, and then I won the next week I won World of Outlaws show at Huset's with the broken leg. So we came back strong, and it was just disappointing what could have been maybe, but again, it could have been a lot worse, I suppose. But that was probably the strongest team I ever had, and it's fat. We had the whole package with motors and crew and everything.
Well, at least you didn't have to do back flips off the wing with those broken legs.
Well, I come back at that race at Huset's, the Outlaw Show, and I was up in the grandstands, before, and I got a plate and 12.5-inch screws in my left leg, and it's only been 2.5 weeks, I think. And some guy said to me, "So if you win tonight, you gonna do a wing dance?" And I was like, "Yeah, right." I said, "Yeah, if I win tonight, if I win this Alice run, I'll do a wing dance." And I won the damn thing. And I'm like, "Well, I'm getting up on top of the wing. I promised this guy." So I had my whole crew stand there getting ready to catch me if I slip off this thing, break my leg again.
Now
that was a big.
My partner's over here looking
for us.
My partner's over here looking for some Vicodin every time he mentioned that.
That's just. I mean, that's a big bone to break, your leg bone. I mean, I don't know exactly where you broke it, but anywhere in your leg, that's got to be painful.
No, I thought that was painful. I thought that was pretty bad. And
oh God, don't tell me you got a worse one.
Yeah, and then in 2010, a clod of mud come through the lower right panel and busted my right leg in half, both bones straight in half, and that made the first one not seem like it wasn't that painful. It was way worse. But I got compartment syndrome. If anyone out there listening knows what that is, it's when the bones broke, but it didn't break through my skin. They don't want it to break the skin because they're afraid of infection. But in reality, I would have been better off if it would have, because there's nothing more painful than compartment syndrome. And they gave me every kind of drug you could. It doesn't take the pain away. So it was a pretty bad deal. That one was real bad. And I thought I knew pain until I had that one. That was pretty bad.
That was from a dirt clod.
Yeah, there were some side panels. I had got fired from the big game team, and Linton Jeffrey, my friend, was nice enough to loan me his car, and they'd come out with these right side panels, like a J&J, if anyone knows, but they're fiberglass. They weren't metal, and it needs to. The right side, especially on a sprint car, it's got to be aluminum or some sort of metal, because we hit the cushion and stuff all the time. And big clod of mud. I set fast time. I got through the heat. I'm going to win the feature, and I'm trying to pass Tyler Walker. And I remember going to turn 3 and seeing a big clod come off his right rear, and it just came through that lower panel and literally felt like someone put my leg up on a table and hit it with a sledgehammer, broke both bones straight in half right in the middle, and that was painful.
I think that's something that I'm starting to grasp this year, is how it seems so deceiving, because you think you're racing on dirt, so you think like a powdery, maybe a little bit of a sticky substance. You don't realize how hard that dirt and that surface can get.
Well, I tell people all the time, and even for us who do it all the time, and actually at the Knoxville Nationals this year was that way, and in general it never is. Go walk around sometimes after the races and see what that ledge, that cushion's really like. And sometimes, I've seen it even at Eagle or especially California, and even in Knoxville at the Nationals this year, it can be like 2 feet high and like a brick wall or a big curb. And it's kind of amazing these cars can take the abuse that they take. I always tell people, go run your street car into the curb at 5 miles an hour and see what it does to your car, let alone at 100 and some miles an hour. And that's what makes sprint cars amazing. I think they're all race cars, really. It's amazing they put up with what they do, and it's what makes it exciting.
Well, that giant right rear tire, is what allows you guys to bounce off that berm. If you guys had a lot smaller tire, such as a street car, or even something that's like on the front of the car, you'd wreak havoc on that berm, or that berm would wreak havoc on you, I should say.
Yeah, it's pretty. Like if you look at our front aluminum spindles, hold one in your hand, and to believe that they put up with the abuse that they put up was pretty amazing.
Oh yeah.
Let's fast forward just a little bit in your career. We're getting to the end of our conversation here, so we don't want to take up too much of your time. You talked about you have your 2 sons that are now involved in racing. Was it much of a conversation for them to get involved, or was it kind of automatic?
No, I'm like my dad. I didn't want them to race, but then I'm not. I took them go-kart racing a little bit, but again, they were kind of like me. They didn't get to race very much because I was racing, and so I was only able to take them in the wintertime a couple of times, and then, when they got to micros and things like that, they really didn't get to race very often. So I feel bad about that in a way, but I had to. If Dad's career doesn't keep going, we can't eat. So, I tried to take them as much as I could, but I really didn't have the time that most fathers can to put into their son's career. So, and actually, it hurts them even now that I can't, that I'm not retired and that I'm not helping him. Carson, my youngest especially, has got a ton of talent. He just needs to be able to show people. He needs someone, overseeing him, and I try to as much as I can. But he just got a ride today, and he's going to be able to run 50, 60 races this year, I think. So that's going to be huge for him. But yeah. Austin, my oldest son, was like the second youngest person to make the AMA in the Knoxville Nationals, and he's now got a great ride with the Casey's General Store team at 2KS with Troy and Tammy Renfro, and it's just like me back in the day. You got to travel. You got to, no matter what, if you're a golfer or what it is, experience, you can't buy it. You got to get it, and the guy that does it the most is probably going to be the best at it. So Austin and Carson are just like any young guy, or like I was. They just need to get out and race away from Knoxville. Like, again, it's the same thing. Knoxville's so amazing, but they need to get out and go to those little podunk tracks that get rough and you can't see as good, and they're dirty and dusty and banging some wheels and that kind of thing to turn into an all-around sprint car driver.
Dang it, I had a good question, and then I completely lost it. Dang it, I had
talk
that.
too much, I guess.
No, it's good. We appreciate it. We've had some of these legends that they give me 3 or 4 word answers, and a 30-minute interview turns into 8 minutes, and I don't know what to do.
Well, let's be honest. He sat in the bar with Sammy Swindell, so he knows what kind of conversation Sammy's going to give you.
That's not very good. That's not very exciting. I've hung out with Sammy plenty of times. And
Now,
you got to carry the conversation.
Yeah.
I don't know how many times you got to talk to Roger Rager. That's on the other side of the spectrum.
Right.
Yeah. He's a great guy.
All right, I got the question back. I finally remembered it. How much did your perspective of racing change when you started to help your sons, almost becoming kind of a car owner?
Well, I right then when Austin was starting, he had raced a year or two, and my dad took him kind of racing for a year or two. I didn't get to see him as much, I wasn't around him, and I wasn't racing against him as much. And then I got hurt in 2010. That same year, I broke my leg. Earlier in the year, I tore my bicep tendon out and got sidelined. And I was watching him at Knoxville one night, and I'm just a nervous wreck. I'm a lunatic. And my wife was like, I just realized something. You haven't watched Austin really race, have you? Because normally I was racing, so I'm kind of off and I'm blocking it out, doing my own thing. And I said, no, I've never really watched him race. She said, you need to calm down. So she's pretty amazing. I don't know how she can watch both her sons and her husband race, and there's so many different emotions there. She needs me to win, and of course, but she needs me to win to pay the bills, and then, she doesn't want to see her babies get hurt, and she wants them to do well. And, yeah, she's a pretty amazing woman to be able to do what she does. I on the other hand, I'm good at blocking stuff out. If I have to race against Austin and Carson, of course, I definitely cut them some slack as far as I don't want to put any bad fly jobs on them, but, I want them to win more than I want myself to win. And I'm just, as a father, you just care that they don't get hurt and they can do their best.
Talk to me a little bit about your wife. Has she ever mentioned that R word when you were going through some of these injuries?
No, in fact, she's the other way. I have, and there's times we've been, dead broke and especially hurt. And that last time especially was really bad. I'd lost my ride. Tore my bicep tendon out, and then I lost my ride, and then I broke my leg in half. So it was a horrible year, and I was kind of in my prime and just come off of 2009. I'd won 19 features, and I won all kinds of stuff, and we had a great year. And to have that happen the next year, you get depressed, and you're on the pain pills and whatever, and it just sucks. You're sitting here with a broken leg, and I definitely thought about retiring many times, and she wouldn't let me. She said, "You're not going to retire this way. You're going to come back. You're going to go back to racing, and then if you decide to retire, you can, but you got to do it under your terms. You can't do it this way." So. She's a pretty amazing woman. I'm really lucky to have her. And behind every good man's a good woman, and I definitely wouldn't be where I'm at without her. And like I said, I probably would have retired a long time ago.
I think that's got to be probably one of the more instrumental aspects to this sport is that when you've got a good spouse behind you, whether you're a female driver and you got a good husband or you're a male driver and you got a great wife, that can mean the world when it comes to winning points championships and series championships.
Yeah, you got to have the whole package, and if you have a wife or family that it's totally against what you're doing and not supportive, and I've had some friends that I'm not going to mention names that don't have supportive wives like that, and they still do okay, but I think they would just be so much more successful if they had what I had, and my mom was always very supportive of my dad, and especially back in those days, those guys seemed a lot tougher, a lot hardcore, but it was a tougher sport really back then. I think you didn't see any little skinny guys with little scrawny arms running sprint cars back in the 60s and 70s, really. I don't know if Kyle Larson would have made it back then. You see guys like Judd Larson with big old arms.
That's what I was going to say, like Kyle Larson, maybe. He's kind of a tiny guy, but very talented.
Well, it's the same.
I remember when my dad got power steering for the first time, and he was so happy. It was like the best Christmas he ever had. I remember, he got hurt so much, and he finally got power steering. He was like, "Oh my God, this is amazing."
Yeah, it's the same thing with the late models, and even going up to NASCARs, the power steering when it came through. And I remember when I first got started in the racing in the late 70s, we didn't run power steering because it took like 12 horsepower. We weren't going to give that away.
Mm-hmm. That's look at the pictures of those guys from back in the day. There wasn't no little scrawny dudes. They were all pretty badass guys with pretty big, strong arms and stuff on them. But again, it's all good. It's great. These young guys coming up. It's kind of amazing. Like you said, they start so young. By the time you think, my gosh, the guy's 16. He's amazing. But he's been racing for 11 years. Yeah. Not to mention, I truly believe, when I was young, there was a thing called Sprint 8 video game under the grandstands at Knoxville. And to this day, I still think it helped me. I still think about some of the things I did to win those races back then. And it still comes into my mind. So the boys now have this iRacing, and I think all of that stuff is experience. It's not, maybe the greatest experience, but it's definitely experience, and there's things to learn. I believe things to learn in everything you can race, no matter what it is. And so these young guys coming up, when they're 16, 15, 14, heck, they raced more than I did by the time I was 30. So
yeah.
It's kind of cool in that sense.
We got one last question we'd like to ask a lot of these veterans that have toured around and done a lot of racing in their career. And it's not necessarily a way to attack the sport or talk down about it, but just to kind of get a perspective of your mindset. If you could change anything about racing, anything at all, what would you change to make things better for you as Terry McCarl?
I wish there was just some more sponsorships available for Terry McCarl, but we all wish that. But I wish it didn't cost as much. But you can't stop technology, and that's just the way it is. And I wish it was more based on talent, like when Doug Wolfgang first came to Knoxville and he crashed about every car in the pit area, and they'd fire him and he'd just walk down the pits and jump into another one because he was pretty crazy and had some talent. And nowadays, this just works. Even in sprint car racing, if you're not coming with money of some sort, because it's just so expensive to stick up for the car owners. I just sad that Carson, my youngest, isn't and Austin hadn't got to where they're at now a couple of years ago. But it is what it is. You got to look at life and with reality and what you're faced with. I tell my sons they're pretty lucky that they have a dad who knows as many people as I know. Maybe they don't have a rich father, but they got a dad with a lot of connections that has helped them more than maybe just Joe Smith over there that doesn't have any connections. So, I wish it didn't take so much money, but again, you can't stop it. And, I'm glad safety things have come in, and I think the fire crews have gotten way better. There's a lot of positives, but, it just is, racing is what it is. And again, you have to deal with what's thrown at you and try to be the best you can today. It's kind of like comparing people, AJ Foyt to Steve Kinzer to Donnie Schatz. You really can't. It's just be the best you can be at the time you were there, and that's all you can. That's all you can be. And those guys were the best of their time, and that's pretty amazing. And I was pretty good in my time around here, so I'm not done yet, but I might have a few more races to win, I hope.
Well, we asked Dave Despain that same question, and he gave your answer. He said you guys need an ATM with no cap.
Yeah.
ATM card, no limit.
Absolutely.
Speaking of, you talked about how sponsors are always an issue. You've got a nice list of some great sponsors. Why don't you run down a couple of them, and maybe we can send them some business? Well,
I'm, as a racer, you guys know, and even on your ad, you'll take anyone you can, really, pretty much. Actually, I have down a few sponsors. I had an energy drink that was like the devil, and I said, I can't have the devil on the car. But I'm just lucky. I have the snowplow.com. I mean, it's you would think snow shovels would be made overseas, offshore somewhere, and most of them are. And it's not only made in the United States; it's made in Iowa. So I'm so proud of them. And Jeff and Stacy Moosman, he invented this thing and built it all himself. And Clary in Iowa, they're just amazing people. And I'm just fortunate to have met him through his good friend Randy Anderson that used to race, got him come to the races, and we met. And I couldn't be more proud to have such a great sponsor like that, because it's so easy for me to try to sell it, because it is an amazing product. Anyone out there that has them, snowplow.com, you can go there and get one. And best snow pusher. They're a snow pusher. They're not necessarily like a snow shovel. It works really well. And back where we're from, that's a great partner to have. And they've just been great for me. But Country Builders Construction that I drove for back in 1991, 92, they're still part of my team out of California. So I go out there in the spring and race with the Outlaws, and I go in the fall to the Trophy Cup and race for the Oldfield family. And they're still a big part of my team. Bosma Poultry, Lauren Bosma has been with me since 1995, actually. He's been a big part of my team. He owns my truck and trailer, and just a great guy, and is always there for me. So, you build these lasting relationships like that. That's another cool thing about racing, that lasts forever. The Oldfields are like my family. Bosma's like my family. And now Jeff and Stacy are. So, we're just lucky to have those guys involved. And Sears World Telephone's come on the last few years, Don Long, and it's made it possible for me to come over there to I-80 and those places, come and race those 360 shows. And he's a great guy. I wish I'd have got with him about 10 or 15 years ago. I mean, he's just an amazing guy to be around. And, it's Destiny Motorsports and Phil and Vivian. I got all kinds of great guys that, help me make this thing happen. I always tell the fans, and I think they're pretty knowledgeable race fans, really support the people who support racing. And I think they really do. I think they're really loyal to the names they see on these things. Heck, I got Kalani Fender out of Hawaii that sponsors me, and Burnett's Rock and Landscaping down in Florida. And so I travel all over. I'm lucky, but I've got friends everywhere we go, and got, little sponsors that try to take care of us when we're down in those areas. But, it takes a lot of money to run these. I don't have a lot of sponsorship, but everybody I have is like family to me. And I think we do probably the best with what we have. And I try to look as good as I can, look like we have $1 million, but we definitely don't. But I think my team does the best with what we have better than anybody in the country, really.
Talk about 2018. Do you have plans kind of in the works, something solidified, what you're looking at doing?
No, I'm probably looking at the same type of schedule, go down to Florida and run, maybe run the Outlaws Evolution over at East Bay at the 360s, and then just kind of go from there. Austin is getting married March 17th, so we're not going to be able to go out to Tulare and Stockton out in California like we have every other year, the last few years. So, and then start back up around here. Like I said, with Don Long and the Searsville Telephone, we can get more 360 races. I got a Moyle 360 engine, and that thing really runs. We love going to I-80. The Kosiskis, they just do. It's really became one of my favorite racetracks in the country, and they really learned how, I think, to set the track up for sprint cars too. And it's just such a fun track. It's usually up banging the fence or right around the bottom, and Slide Job City everywhere else. I think I recommend that track to any sprint car fan to come and watch. I think it puts on one of the best races in the country, and it just turned into my son Austin and Carson. They both love going there. So for a big track, I think it puts on amazing races.
Well, and you put on a heck of a battle between you and Cody Ledger at the end of the year in 2017. That was probably one of my top 5 favorite races at I-80 Speedway.
It's such a tricky track. I was out there leading, and I knew I was kind of having a bit of a problem. Got real tight, and so I moved down to the bottom, and then Cody was like 4th or 5th on that last restart, and heck, he went to the top and smoked everybody's butt, and it actually drove around me, and I was able to get back and slide back in front of him and change my lane. But he kind of outsmarted all of us there for a while, and I was lucky I was able to get back by him. But he's been doing a great job, and it's fun. You got Jack Dover. You got a lot of talent over there, Jack Dover and Cody and all the guys in that area. So I hope they have more and more sprint car races at I-80. But again, it's one of my favorite tracks, and Phil Durst and his family have supported me over the years, and Lincoln Auto Auction. So it's kind of fun to get over there and be able to see those guys. And we're having our cars built out of Eagle chassis now, a Silver car out of Eagle. And so it's nice having everything so close.
Well, I certainly enjoy seeing you. I know that if I'm ever working in the pits at I-80, the 24 is always on my radar to go and talk to, because like we just learned with this whole conversation, I ask one word and you just keep going. You're a great talker, and that's as a radio host and as a pit reporter, I love those kind of guys. All right,
or your fans probably think I talk too much, but
no, there's no such thing. There's no such thing.
Not at all.
The more you talk, people just love it, because it's not just nonsense. I mean, you got a pretty big wealth of knowledge that you can bestow on fans and drivers and crews of all sorts.
And our regular listeners get tired of hearing us.
Yeah.
Well, I like to hear people talk the normal instead of just giving the political answer all the time. Some of the fans don't like it when I give my I'm not afraid to speak my mind generally, but sometimes that might rub them the wrong way. But if it gets them excited about racing, that's what we like to see, get them to come out and see a show.
Whether they boo or cheer, as long as they're saying something.
That's what Lloyd Beckman told my dad once, I think.
Well, Terry, we appreciate your time. Best of luck in the off season with your sanity, and we can't wait to see you at the track of 2018.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate you having me on, and look forward to seeing you all over at the Kosiski's awesome track of I-80.
We'll see you, bud. Thanks. Have a good one.
See you later.
I want to say a big thank you to Quaker Steak & Lube, the official watering hole of the Front Stretch, and thank you to all of you for tuning in today. We'll do it again next weekend as the Front Stretch will roll on here on AM 590, Omaha's ESPN Radio.
Have you ever watched NASCAR, dirt track, or IndyCar and thought, I could do that? Joe's Karting in Council Bluffs is the place to put your money where your mouth is. Races fire off every 10 minutes, so what are you waiting for? Get to Joe's Karting on 23rd Avenue in Council Bluffs, next to the Mid-America Center, and find out how easy it is to drive a race car. Each Joe's Karting car is powered by an eco-friendly Honda engine capable of a 14-second lap. That's if you're as good as you think.
The official watering hole of the Front Stretch has you covered any day of the week with the best wings, great burgers, and amazing steaks. Each weekday from 4 to 6 is happy hour, featuring $1 off draft and well drinks plus $4 Luberitas. Mondays are kids' night. Tuesdays are all-you-can-eat wings for $12.95, and the lube even delivers to the Council Bluffs area. Like Quaker Steak & Lube Council Bluffs on Facebook for a full list of weekly events.
Get to Quaker Steak & Lube.
Mid-America Drive, Council Bluffs.
Any driver will tell you that the key to winning a race is preventive maintenance. Pat at Eccles Heating and Air can make sure your wallet is on the winning side with a preventive care package. Pat will look over your existing unit and make recommendations to make sure you're toasty warm this winter. Drivers trust Pat at the racetrack with their safety, so you know you can trust him with your home heating. Call Pat today at 402-331-1755 and schedule your heater checkup. Eccles Heating and Air.
This has been the Front Stretch Radio Show, presented by Joe's Karting in Council Bluffs. To contact Dan or Dirk, find them on Facebook at The Front Stretch or email them at frontstretch590@gmail.com. If you missed any part of today's show or want to hear a previous show, subscribe to the Joe's Karting YouTube page, where you can find almost every Front Stretch show.